By the summer of 1943, Japan's Zero fighter had ruled the skies of the Pacific for nearly 2 years. Fast, agile, and deadly. It had humiliated Allied pilots from Pearl Harbor to the Philippines. American pilots once whispered that to face a Zero meant almost certain death. But all that changed with the arrival of one aircraft, the F6F Hellcat. A machine born not from panic, but from precision. A fighter designed to outfly, outgun, and outlast Japan's most feared weapon. At the Grumman Aircraft Plant in Bethpage, New York, engineers worked day and night. They studied wrecked Zeros recovered from the Aleutians and China. They examined every bolt, every flaw, every weakness, and then designed its executioner. The F6F was not elegant. It was a beast, large, thick-skinned, and brutally efficient. Its Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine delivered 2,000 horsepower, twice the power of the early Zeros. It climbed faster, dived harder, and could take punishment that would rip the Japanese fighters apart. When the first Hellcat rolled out of the factory, test pilot Butch O'Hare called it a flying anvil. But when he pulled the trigger, its 6.50 caliber Browning guns roared like thunder. This was not just another plane, it was the dawn of America's air dominance. The Hellcat's baptism of fire came over the Pacific in 1943. From the decks of the USS Essex and USS Yorktown, the blue-painted fighters launched into humid skies. They were heading for the Marshall Islands into the territory of the Zero. The first encounters were brutal. Japanese pilots dived with perfect precision, their turns tight and graceful. But something was different this time. When the Zero tried to loop behind, the Hellcat simply rolled up, climbed, and came down, firing. The Zero was nimble, but it could not dive fast enough. Its fragile frame shook apart under high speeds. The Hellcat could dive at 400 knots and pull out safely, a feat no Japanese fighter could match. Lieutenant Alexander Vratziu of WWII recalled, "The Hellcat gave us confidence. For the first time, we could fight on our own terms." Within months, he shot down 19 Japanese aircraft, 6 of them in a single day. The secret wasn't just power, it was survivability. Grumman's engineers called it the Iron Works for a reason. Self-sealing fuel tanks, armor plates around the cockpit, thick landing gear that could take brutal carrier landings. The Hellcat was built not just to win, but to bring its pilot home. On the other side, Japanese commanders were growing desperate. Their veteran pilots, men trained before the war, were dying faster than they could be replaced. New recruits, barely trained, were thrown into combat against a machine they could neither outfly nor outgun. One pilot later wrote, "When the blue Hellcats came, it was like fighting the sky itself." By 1944, the numbers told the story. For every Hellcat shot down, 19 Japanese planes fell. It was one of the most lopsided kill ratios in aviation history. At the Battle of the Philippine Sea, known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, Hellcat pilots destroyed more than 300 Japanese aircraft in a single day. The sky was filled with smoke trail and burning wings. Veteran ace David McCampbell alone shot down 9 aircraft in one mission. As the sun set over the Pacific, Japan's once invincible Zero had become obsolete, and the Hellcat, the rough, rugged creation of American industry, was now the undisputed king of the sky. But the war was far from over. Ahead lay Iwo Jima, Okinawa, and the long road to Japan itself, and the Hellcat would lead the way. The Pacific skies were now ruled by a new predator, the Grumman F6F Hellcat, a fighter born not from victory, but from defeat. Every rivet, every engine roar, carried the lessons learned from the humiliation at Pearl Harbor and the early Pacific battles. This machine wasn't built for beauty, it was built for vengeance. The Japanese pilots had entered the war with supreme confidence, Their Mitsubishi Zero was unmatched, fast, agile, deadly. It danced through the air like a ghost. For 2 long years, the Zero dominated the Pacific, striking fear into every Allied pilot who saw its rising sun insignia. But then came the Hellcat. Heavier, tougher, and brutally efficient, the F6F was not a duelist. It was a brawler. Its 6.50 caliber Browning machine guns didn't whisper, they thundered. When they spoke, Japanese aircraft vanished in clouds of smoke and fire. One Hellcat burst could shred a Zero's fragile frame. The first encounters left Japanese pilots stunned. They had never seen an American fighter that could climb, dive, and strike with such precision. And worse, the Hellcat could take punishment that would tear a Zero to pieces. Many Japanese aces wrote later that it felt like fighting a flying tank. Time after time, Hellcats came home with wings punctured, engines leaking, and holes large enough to crawl through, yet still flying. That resilience became a symbol of American industry itself, unyielding, unstoppable, relentless. But what truly made the Hellcat deadly was not just the machine. It was the men who flew it. These were the new generation of Navy pilots. They trained tirelessly on the decks of aircraft carriers, mastering takeoffs and landings in raging seas. They studied every weakness of the Zero, turning its agility against it. They learned to climb where the Zero couldn't follow, to dive faster than its fragile frame could withstand. The skies that had once belonged to Japan were slowly reclaimed, one dogfight at a time. The tide turned in battles like the Philippine Sea, later called the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. In that clash alone, Hellcat pilots destroyed more than 300 Japanese aircraft while losing fewer than 30 of their own. It was a massacre in the sky, and it marked the death of Japan's air superiority. The once feared Zero now burned helplessly across the Pacific horizon. But behind every victory, there was loss. The Hellcat might have been a fortress in the air, but war spared no one. Many pilots never returned, swallowed by the sea, lost to the endless blue. Those who survived carried ghosts with them, faces of friends who didn't make it home. The sound of the Hellcat's engine, once a roar of triumph, became a reminder of everything they'd lost. As the war dragged on, Japan grew desperate, the skies filled with kamikaze, young men flying to certain death. Hellcat pilots faced them day after day, knowing these weren't just enemies, but victims of a dying empire's final madness. One American pilot wrote, "They didn't fight to win, they fought to die." And that made it harder to shoot them down. By the summer of 1945, the war was nearly over. Japan's cities burned, its fleets lay at the bottom of the sea, and its air force was shattered. The Hellcat had done its job. Over 12,000 were built, more than 5,000 enemy aircraft destroyed, a kill ratio of 19-1, unmatched in aviation history. When peace finally came, the Hellcat's engines went silent. The war that had created it was over, but the legend remained. Only a few of these iron beasts survived, resting now in museums or flying in air shows, where the sound of their engines still shakes the air, echoes of a world that once burned. Old pilots, gray-haired and slow, watch them from the crowd. For a moment, they are young again, feeling the stick in their hands, the wind rushing past their canopies, the sun blazing over the endless Pacific. For a moment, they remember their brothers. The laughter, the fear, the silence after the radio went dead.